Good afternoon, Philadelphia. Welcome back to the Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860. This is your host, Gary Heasley. I'm joined in the studio with Felice Fine. Felice, welcome again.
My pleasure.
And Chris Glover, who joined us last hour. It's been a while since you've been in the studio with us here.
Always love being here.
Nice to have you back. That
Always
was a little bit of a terrifying conversation with Alex Newman.
Got to fortify the house, apparently. He's coming.
But so we're going to jump into the second hour, and we've got with us a guest who's returning. I think most of our listeners know who he is. It's Victor Davis Hanson, Senior Fellow in Classics and Military History, the Hoover Institution, Stanford, Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale, and just generally a guy whose analysis is valued the world over. So, Victor, thank you for joining us on the Conservative Voice in Philadelphia once again.
Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure to have you. And, you know, we cover a lot of topics here. The first segment we did, the first hour we did, we covered some education stuff and you know, just some of these events that are just streaming out of this Trump administration just as fast as you can. I mean, from Gaza to this beef in Argentina scandal and everything. And we're seeing on social media, it seems to me, I could be wrong because it's subjective, but it seems to me that we've seen a much harsher assessment of the Trump administration since the Gaza deal got signed. It seems almost like things have ramped up, like they're trying to make sure that doesn't get known. Are you seeing that, or what are your thoughts on where we stand right now?
Well, I think the left and the Democratic Party is now woken up that the second administration is a corrective of the first. And by that I mean there are no Bill Barrs or John Bolton or Jim Mattis's or Kelly's in them. They're all on the same page. And they feel that there's a sense of urgency, second term, final term. And more importantly, they're not addressing just political issues and symptoms. They're dealing with root causes of what they feel is the progressive dominance in the media, corporations, K-12, academia. And so it's not just the border. They're trying to, they're going here in California. They're saying, why do you give driver's license to illegal aliens? And why do you give, licenses to people who can't read English? They're looking at architecture. They're looking at the universities. They're looking at transgender males and female sports. So it's a holistic 360 social, economic, political, cultural counter-revolution. And I think the left is woken up to that, and they're saying, well, gee, we thought it was just a matter of they have the House and Senate and the White House, and it was going to be like a George W. Bush or maybe first-term Trump, or maybe what Bob Dole and McCain or Romney would have done. But this is something that threatens not just our political power, but our cultural, economic, and social influence that has been pretty dominant. So the stakes are much, much higher now. And I think the left feels, as they've said, we're going to take to the street. We're going to get in your face. And the rhetoric is getting pretty scary. And the violence is kind of reminds me of Bleeding Kansas in 1855, on the prelude to the Civil War. The left is bleeding Kansas, so to speak. So, but they feel that if Trump would be successful, he would fundamentally alter the country in a way that Obama said he would, but didn't quite. So I think they're desperate and they're angry, and they don't know what to do because they don't have traditional political power. So they're doing the smutty videos, the F word, threatening people, glorifying the assassin of Luigi Mangione, or clinging on to a guy like Obrador, the illegal alien, damning the memory of Charlie Kirk. All these things they feel will create a sense of chaos, shut down the government, and then in the general chaos, people will metaphorically put their hands over their ears, get in a fetal position, and say, just make it all go away. It's just too much to fathom. Trump is just too disruptive. I wanted the disruption. I wanted the counter-revolution, but I can't take all of these stimuli coming at me all at once. That's the strategy, I think, the left has.
Usually a guy that's very careful with his language is James Carville. Right? I mean, he's been sounding the alarm for the left, saying you guys are out of touch. You're heading down a path. You're losing voters. You're losing some influence. And he made a statement the other day that I think fits perfectly in with what you're saying. If we could, let's hit clip 4.
You know what we do with collaborators,
Right.
and I think that these corporations. My fantasy dream is that this nightmare ends in 2029, and I think we ought to have radical thing. I think they all ought to have their heads shaven. They should be put in orange pajamas, and they should be marched down Pennsylvania Avenue, and the public should be invited to spit on it. The universities, the corporations, the law firms, all of these collaborators should be shaved, pajamaed, and spit on.
Yeah, that was a very informative, revealing, I think, accidentally revealing comment, because when he used the term collaborators, it assumed that they were all on his side. All these institutions should be neutral, but he obviously thinks that they were never neutral. The academics were always left wing. The corporate boardroom was left wing. The K through 12, Silicon Valley, and then when they moved away from left wing, then he considered that betrayal or collaboration. So it really shows you the mindset of what the left. That's why they're angry. They feel that they have biased institutional support. The bureaucrats, IRS, DOJ, FBI, CIA, you name it. All the big Wall Street law firms, everybody in Silicon Valley. And now they think, wow, it's not just that Trump has a long memory. We don't want to get on his long side. But more importantly, if half of the foreign investment materializes, just half, or all this deregulation and tax reduction and AI and crypto and genetic engineering, all this new energy development, if all of that were to be reified, you could see, radical changes in federal revenue and GDP and Americans working with higher wages, especially if you were to deport the 10 million that Biden let in illegally. Forget the other 20 million that were here. Just the 10 million would make a radical change. So I think they're also worried that the business community and Silicon Valley are they're not paranoid about the stock market anymore like they were in March or tariffs. They see now that there was an argument for a lot of what Trump is doing. And more importantly, he's a nationalist. So he is telling Kuwait and he's telling Mexico, you're not paying our companies. You owe our companies billions of dollars, our contractors. He's telling Europe, you're putting artificial laws on Google and Facebook and Apple, and you're doing this crazy antitrust, or you're censoring their content. You're going out. And so these left-wing CEOs are saying, you know what, I don't really like Trump, but he treated me a lot better than Biden did and Obama. And we're going to make a lot more money with him than we ever imagined. And maybe we're kind of patriotic after all. We'd like to see the United States beat China because we know China is a one-eyed jack and we know what they're like. We dealt with them, and all of a sudden this president says they're not going to exploit you guys anymore. And so I think that's what's terrifying Carville and Hyken Jeffries and Schumer. And when Nancy Pelosi says we're going to arrest federal agents, she sounds just like John Calhoun or Jefferson Davis, States' rights, nullifications. I want to say to her, Nancy, it's not 1861. You're firing on Fort Sumter. You can't do that.
Right.
State and local law does not take precedence over federal officers enforcing the law of the land, which is federal immigration. But they're so angry and they're so unhinged that Trump has an uncanny, eerie way of making them defend positions that nobody likes. Nobody likes to see these Antifa punks attack ICE officers. No one likes letting people out the crime. When you see what happened in the subway with Arena, the Ukrainian immigrant, nobody likes the champion Obregon. Nobody likes that, and yet Luigi Mangione, they find themselves so obsessed with Trump. Leah Thomas and they all get on these 20, 30 issues, and then they boast to their They boast to their base, and then they're in a doom loop. They understand that they have to win primaries and get nominated. You've got to be lunatic and attack Trump and take the unpopular anti-Trump. But then in the general election, as Harris discovered, you're not going to win. So they don't know what to do. And you can take the unpopular position that the American people don't like if you're Barack Obama or Clinton, because you can lie about it or you can paste it over or you're so charismatic. But they don't have anybody like that. There's nobody that's charismatic or has the rhetorical skills of Clinton or Obama.
How about Mamdani?
He does, but he's not making any effort really to be a moderate. He's saying that I'm an out, and he's a one city candidate, and he's also a product of an off-year election. And it's not even a midterm election; it's an off-year election, and turnout is low. And you've had enormous demographic changes in New York. Almost 1 million Jewish Americans have left the last 20 years. You've got 65% of the foreign-born voter are going to say they're voting for him, and he's still going to get about 10% vote of the resident population of Greater New York, 8 or 9 million. If he even still was a weak candidate, and Cuomo he doesn't even look like the old Cuomo. Maybe the second debate he was a little better, but he looks tired. He doesn't look combative. He looks like he's beaten or defeated. And even then, if you add the two percentages together, had they just got a Bloomberg or Giuliani centrist and rallied everybody around that, they would have won easily. But because their percentages are still greater than Mamdani's. So I don't think he's a bellwether. He's a McGovern type of candidate that they all think they have to go hard left. But if they're going to nominate somebody like him for statewide office or national office, they're going to lose. It's going to be a 20-year drought, reminiscent of George McGovern in '72. They didn't get the act together till Bill Clinton in 1992. They had 4 years with Jimmy Carter, but that was just an aberration.
Right.
It took them 20 years to get a Bill Clinton and get back on track with the old John Kennedy party.
It is some of the attraction of Mamdani is some of this that these New Yorkers are looking at the system they've been living in and saying, listen, this is corrupt. Our cost of living is out of control. We can't afford our apartments. We can't ever buy anything like a house or a car. This system hasn't served us well. Our employment opportunities are not what we wanted. The Roosevelt Hotel was full of illegal aliens who were being paid for by the federal government for years. The city was supporting that. These markets that are open on the streets of New York now that are just like the bazaars in the Middle East or in Africa where people are just trading goods and the local businesses are suffering. Are the New Yorkers, is there some element of this for just saying, listen, how much worse can it get than what the de Blasio and all these other people have done to us? And so we might as well try the lunatic.
Yeah, I think so. The last normal mayor was Bloomberg and Giuliani. And they paid a lot more. Bloomberg, at least early on, did. Later, he kind of got hard left. But they did pay attention to getting the streets clean, safe, the snow removed. And when they didn't, they got hit for it. But I think if you look at the demographics of Mamdani's support, you're right. It's the subsidized poor who want a socialist redistributionist. And then it's an upscale, upper middle, often young, often white and Asian professional group. These are people like book editors. They're people like young lawyers. Or
highly educated.
People. Highly educated, a lot of letters after their name, a lot of self-importance, a lot of idea that I played by the rules. I got huge student debt. I went to a good college. I should have status. And yet here I am in New York. When I go to work, I'm successful. But when I come home, I can't afford a $70,000 a month apartment. I cannot afford to get a good car that's befitting my status. I can't go to Europe like I should deserve to. You have a lot of frustrated upper middle class professionals, and they seem to be mostly white, because when you look at the the groups that are supporting him, you understand there's a lot of Middle East people, there's a lot of pro-Palestinian people, there's a lot of radical, but there's a lot of poor people. But the people who are really the most vocal in giving them the money the most are is that upper middle class professional.
Mm-hmm. And some of those folks are, I mean, some of those upper middle, these people are making a lot of cash. And so you have this sort of almost like a barbell. On one hand, you've got this mass of people who are struggling and the system isn't working for them. And the other group have just been educated to think that socialism is good and they're making a lot of money and they can't differentiate whether socialism is how they're making their money or is it this capitalist thing. I don't know if it's a combination of education and just this incredible blurring of our system where it's now public private partnership is probably the way you would describe the entire economy now. And so
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that's right. I think the irony is what you're saying is that these people are angry that the calcified, ossified economy doesn't give them upward mobility, but the reason it doesn't is that the cure that they're looking for was actually the problem, the culprit. And
Right.
that was an overregulated, high tax, redistributive economy. Whereas if you've gone into New York and you just relax some of the zoning or laws or the environmental laws on construction, gave incentives
Hmm.
to the free market so people could, build homes and less government regulation, then you'd have something like you see in what's going on in Phoenix or Texas or Florida.
Yep.
And we have 4 or 5 million people leaving these blue state models. I'm in California, so I can see the same thing as New York, where people cannot afford a house. And
Hmm.
it's because I know a developer that has to film every house that he builds. He has to hire a cameraman because he's afraid that later, when the house is built, the person will say that I found a little defect and you didn't follow this regulation and I want my money back. Or the government will come in and say, oh, by the way, you didn't do this. And then he has it on record that he did. But that's very expensive and it's
Wow.
time consuming. So I think that's what this flirtation with socialism
Mhm.
is. There's a lot of people who don't know the difference between capitalism and socialism. And they thought they were sold a bill of goods that if you go to a good college, so to speak, or a professional school, you deserve a certain standard of living
Mhm.
and you deserve a certain type of living accommodation and cars. And that doesn't happen in a blue state city anymore. It just doesn't happen. And then you ideologically are supposed to be left wing and want redistribution, but when you walk through New York or San Francisco and you see homeless people with feces on the sidewalk, or you see these vendors that get in your face, or you see empty shops in San Francisco, or you see illegal aliens in a once nice hotel, then that you can't really. That's what you're for, but you resent that, and a lot of this is resentment. And there's no middle class agenda for these people in blue states. They don't like the middle class. And yet you'd think these people would say, can't we get a Giuliani to come in here and deregulate and open it up and clean up the city? And there's nobody can do that in the Democratic Party. There is no place for any of those people.
No.
Michael Bloomberg could never function in the Democratic Party anymore. He found that out in the primary.
Mhm.
2020. So there's no room for Bill Clinton. If you look at the 92 and 96 Clinton Gore agenda at the convention, it was closed borders, legal only immigration, try juveniles that are 17 and violent crimes as adults, 100,000 police officers on the street, use energy, all the energy we have, balance the budget. It was not that different than a MAGA agenda.
No.
But if you had that today, would be considered Nazism by the Democratic Party.
That's right. What's happening in New York reminds me, or it may be similar to what happened with Obamacare, right? We have problems in our healthcare industry. We had, pre-existing conditions and people that weren't insured and all these different things. So it's like they sat down and said, well, to fix the healthcare industry, what we probably ought to do is try to figure out how Karl Marx would do it. What would Lenin do? And then they just implemented that, and here we are in 2025 with a government shutdown because the subsidies that have added really nice profit margins to the healthcare providers are going away, and the Democrats aren't going to use it. So, or aren't going, are trying to stop that, or trying to not allow it. So you've got this strange world where we continue to say we've got a problem rather than use this magic wand that Obama talked about Trump having in his first term, this magic wand of free people and a free economy. Instead, we keep surging left. We keep moving left to find the answers that don't work.
Yeah, it's exactly what it's the Unaffordable Care Act. They said it was going to increase competition, and then it brought all of these people into the system. And we have 55 million people now, highest percentage in our history. 16% of the population was not born in the United States. 30 million are probably here illegally. And when they say, well, it's against the law for illegal aliens to get federal health care, they should go into San Joaquin Valley, California. I just went to the ER 2 weeks ago. There were 85 people there. I was the only person there in 85 that spoke English.
Wow.
And there were police people there. And I'm not talking about people coming in with gunshot wounds, although there were some.
Mm-hmm.
There were people just going in there for headaches. They'd never been to a doctor. I mean, I understand a little Spanish, so when I was sitting there, they were saying, I twisted my ankle, yo pierna de las, me duelen las piernas, my leg hurts,
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. And so what I'm getting at is the ER is kind of like the GP, the general practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
for millions of people. Because when you let in 12 million people under Biden, you have 20 million people here already undocumented. And you've got this 16% of the people of the whole nation, 55 million people, are green card holders. Some are citizens, but mostly green card holders are on visas are illegal. They're getting health care of some sort,
Mm-hmm.
but the Democrats keep denying they are. But we all see it every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And here in Fresno County, if you want to get a specialist, a urologist, a cardiologist, you have to wait about 6 months. And when you go into the waiting room, it's not like it was pre-COVID with 2 or 3 people. There's 50 or 60 people. And Gavin Newsom has had to borrow $5 billion from the federal government, a grant, I suppose, to fund Medi-Cal, our version of Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
And 50% of Californians are on Medicaid. 40%, yes, 50%, 20 million people. And 40% of all births in California are on Medicaid. So the state can't afford that, so the federal government gives them money, and then the Democrats say, well, officially, you can't get illegal aliens on the Affordable Care Act. But they're not on the Affordable Care Act. They're under Medicaid, federal Medicaid, and our version, state Medi-Cal. And it's just eating up the budget. If you look at the budget, we used to spend 30, 40% on transportation. Infrastructure, it's down to 7%. It's about 35 to 40% on healthcare. And it's just, everybody knows that. And then the upper middle class sees all this, and you can't criticize it. And they know it's hurting them as well. And yet they don't have the money, or they don't have the status their parents had, or the house.
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people in Silicon Valley. They graduate from places like Berkeley, Stanford. They go to work. They're not the big coders. They're just HR people. They're making 80, 90,000, which sounds great, but not when you're paying $6,000 a month for an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have cars. They use Uber, and yet they're very well educated. They have a couple $100,000 in student loans, and they're all socialists. And that's what's wrong. I mean, it gives enormous opportunity for the Republican Party if they can get just talking about, we're going to build 1 million homes by deregulating, or we're going to give federal incentives to states that fast track infrastructure or housing, but they really got to pound that. And because the Democratic Party is playing, as you pointed out, on the frustrations of the upper middle class, it feels that they are smarter, more sophisticated, better educated than their parents, but they're not doing as well.
Right. And when you think about one of the problems we've been talking about a lot on this show with the Republican Party is that they don't seem to be particularly ready for battle to support this America First agenda, the MAGA agenda, this agenda that was absolutely moderate, a few years ago. That's now considered, as you said, Nazism and tyranny. But they aren't in Congress, seemingly breaking a sweat trying to fight to implement this agenda and really make it permanent through legislation. And I think it's because they don't really support it themselves.
I think that's part of it. I think the Trump administration is so besieged, they have a combative. So, when they get attacked, they make a video of Trump in a jet putting defecation over everybody. Or they want to own what they call own the liberals,
Mm-hmm.
And so they spend an inordinate amount of time replying to the lunacy in a funny way. And sometimes it's brilliant, as we saw in the campaign with the garbage truck and the McDonald's.
Right.
That was brilliant.
That's
Yes.
absolutely, that was brilliant. But aside from all of that, they need something like a Gingrich contract with America. And they're going to say this is a 10-point plan for housing, energy, affordability, crime, foreign policy, the border, um, and then try to push it through so you can institutionalize it through Congress. And they can't. I think they just give up. They say, well, the filibuster, you can't. They'll stop it. So we're going to do everything by executive order, and we're going to really get these people angry and bait them. But they could do it much more quietly and successfully if everybody was on board, or if they could persuade them to be on board. I think the people in the Senate, the ones that I've talked to, they're resigned now that MAGA is not an aberration. That if the next nominee is going to be a J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, who's going to run on the same platform.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all the people like Ben Sass or Bob Corker or all those people are gone.
Yes.
From the Senate and the House mostly.
Most of them. I mean, there's Cornyn is still there and some others, but
yeah, he's there. But
mm-hmm.
he's embattled, and I think he's alone, and he's trying to make sounds like he's MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they need to get an institutionalization of these good things that Trump is doing. But
and if Congress did that, then I think Donald Trump didn't get elected with Republican MAGA voters. He got elected with them, plus Democrats, independents, what we would consider establishment Republicans, those that aren't particularly ideological. They just like the brand. And if our team wins, it's a win. If the other team wins, it's a loss. They give it like football. He got that whole coalition together, and that's how you win swing states, and he won them all. So to me, this is self-evident, but I just am frustrated because you just laid out a very simple approach that would be a great strategy that the American people would stand behind. And there's something missing in the Republican Party that prevents them from doing that.
Yeah, and I think even on immigration, he's still, most people, 55% still want deportations. But if he were to do something radical and say, we had 20 million illegal aliens, maybe 30.
Mm-hmm.
We let in 12. We've got 42.
Mm-hmm.
I want to deport 30 million. Just say that. And I'm going to go after the criminals first, and then I'm going to go, the people are not working. But at the same time, he'd say, but we have another 10 or 15 million. And these are people who have been here 5 or 10 years. They've never committed a crime. They're not on public assistance. And we could fine them $5,000, and they're not going to get amnesty. They're not going to get citizenship, but we'll give them a green card. Then he would take all of the wind out of the Democratic demagoguery. He would solidify that 55% of Hispanic votes that he won, male votes. Mm-hmm. And it would allow him, the pressure would be off ice, because people would just say, well, if you play by the rules and you're willing to pay a fine and you have no criminal record and you're not hurting us by being on public assistance and you're working, you can get a green card. Mm-hmm. And that would really, I think, finesse. I know so many people where I lived that don't speak Spanish, and they were brought here at 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
and they never went, they should have, they never went through the process. They're working, they've never been arrested, they're not on public assistance, and they don't want to be citizens because they don't have the money to go, but they would like a green card. And they voted for Trump, but when you talk to them about the deportations, they're for it. They're for all of it. But then they say things like, "Well, after they get rid of the criminals, they're coming after me," and I don't. And they are being demagogued by the Democrats. So I wish that he'd get out ahead of that issue and just, if he said we're going to deport 30, there must be 30 million people here who have broken the law, or came in under Biden, or on public assistance, or want to go back to Mexico. But after that, we've got some really good material here and we're going to help those people. And I think it would really shock the left.
So that could be a compromise that works, but you made a point in there that I think is lost on most Americans, which is that they don't necessarily get citizenship. There is a
No.
belief that's been built into our psyche as a country, because we've been pounded with this messaging our whole lives, that if you get here, you should become a citizen.
Amnesty.
Amnesty, right. Amnesty means what? The golden ticket,
Right.
get citizenship.
Yep.
But if you go to other countries and you go there legally and you get a green card, you get residency, you're allowed to work, you'll never be a citizen. I don't understand how Americans got to the point where they think anyone who gets across the border, then we're obligated for some reason to put them on a path to citizenship. There's no reason for them
I
to be
know
citizens.
But in 1986, the Simpson-Mazzoli Act that Reagan pushed forward was an amnesty act. And he really got taken by the left because they didn't do the border security, but he gave the amnesty.
Yep.
But he gave an opportunity. But of those who got amnesty, there was about 6 million illegal aliens, and only 2 million applied for citizenship. Everybody was eligible in those categories, but 4 million said, "You know what? I just wanted green card." And I was talking to a guy the other day, and he's absolutely right. He said, "I don't want to make fun of your citizenship, but I can't see much of a difference except voting." And he said, off the record, so many illegals vote. I said, "I don't vote, but I don't really need to vote. I don't really need to hold office." But other than that, there's not much difference anymore other than holding office and voting. You can be in the military if you've got a green card. You can be in the military if you're illegal under Biden. But the point I'm making is a lot of people would say, "I just want to work here. I want to be safe. I feel I'm an American, but I don't want to go through all that hassle to get citizenship." And more importantly, citizenship is what most people object to when you say, can we have people with green? As long as you say that they're not going to be citizens, you win a lot more people over to your side.
Absolutely.
It's just because it doesn't reward an open border, especially if you add a fine to it, $2 or $3 or $4,000, $5,000 to get a green card. And I think that would really, the left is, everybody is for the deportations, but at some point we're going to get the 500,000 criminals out, and then we're going to get a lot of people who came under Biden out, and then we're going to hit the rubber meets the road, because you're going to start meeting people that you had no idea. I went to dinner with a highway patrolman the other night, a lot of them, and his wife looked like she was Italian. She spoke perfect English. She didn't speak Spanish, and she said, "I'm illegal." Wow. I said, "You're illegal?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "You've been working for the county for 20 years. She said, "I know. Nobody ever asked me." And I said, "Well, why didn't you could be a citizen tomorrow because your husband can?" "Yes, but we didn't have the money, and we didn't do this and this and this." But the point is, I'm not saying that she's not culpable, but you really don't want to send her back and round her up at home if you gave her an opportunity to pay a fine and get a green card. That's all I'm saying. And I think it would really be politically smart, because what they're doing is they're trying to just create so much chaos against ICE and blur the issue and forget about all the good people. Good in the sense of bad people, all the people that they're doing us a favor by getting rid of. You don't hear that at all anymore. 90% of these people either have former deportation orders they neglected, or they're criminals. But we don't hear that. and they're
Right.
slowly chipping away at Trump. When you look at his his positivity rate, it could be 52%. I think it might be in the accurate polls, but it's the real-time politics. I think it's 45. A lot of that is a sense of chaos in the streets. And again, most people are not political. They just, I don't know who's causing it. I don't know what the cause is. I just don't want it to continue. And Trump has to take that uncertainty and confusion and use it and direct it to a positive agenda. And I think he can do that because they have no agenda at all. The left, they're really, if you think of what they're for, it's a 30% popularity agenda to the extent that it's even coherent.
So that's interesting. We have Mark Mitchell on from Rasmussen a lot, and frankly, his polling is most of what I look at. I look at a couple of the things, but Rasmussen seems to really have their finger on the pulse of what's actually real. And so when we talk about that, we get down to this number of 30%. And in 2024, you remember I was saying 35%. And what we're considering this 30% is the people who are unreachable. And I think you're right. I mean, that's who they're talking to. And maybe we'll play a clip here in a second on that. But before we do that, you made a comment that I think we need to touch on, which is that illegal aliens vote, because we've been told over and over again, illegal aliens don't vote.
Yeah.
Especially in
no,
Pennsylvania.
Oh, no.
I know there's 2 lawsuits going on to get the Pennsylvania voter rolls, one from the DOJ and one from Public Interest Legal Foundation with Kristen Adams. But we are being told time and again they do not vote in Pennsylvania.
No, I've lived
Interesting
my
they
whole
do
life
in California.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in California, we have the motor voter, but you get automatically registered. So if your name is Jose Gonzalez and you go to disability, they're going to register you to vote. If you get a license and you say, I'm Jose G. Gonzalez, you're going to get another registration. If you go to the unemployment, you're going to get a registration. And they don't even cross-list the addresses. So the joke is that you're mail-in balloting. I know people get 3 or 4 ballots that are illegal.
Yeah.
My son hasn't lived in my house for 20 years, and every once in a while we still get a mail-in ballot to him. And it wouldn't be hard except I always throw them away. And I call them, do you have a ballot? Yes, I have a ballot. Well, you can see in that system that's designed to replicate ballots. I think it was 6 years ago, the DMV said we're sorry, we sent out 100,000 ballots to illegal aliens. Oops. But everybody knows that they vote.
Yes.
Sizable numbers of them vote. And they don't, the Republicans really haven't paid attention because, like the national level, because these blue states, they feel they don't make a difference. They've lost them anyway. But it does hurt us because we have a super majority of left-wing politicians in the House, Assembly, and the Senate. We have no statewide officers.
Right.
Republican. And we only have 9 out of 52 congressmen are Republicans. So we have no representation, even though 40% of the state voted for Trump. And when you look at the actual numbers of people that voted for Trump, I think we're the 2nd largest red state in the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, because we have such a big population of 41 million people. But
I think this is I think this is a really failed strategy of the Republican Party to not go and sort of address that issue. Now, here in Pennsylvania in 2022, I think the governor just wrote an edict and said, if you register to get a driver's license, you're going to be registered to vote unless you voluntarily follow through the process and click a box that says,
it's not just a box.
Yeah, I'm illegal, so I shouldn't get that. You have to opt out.
And it is a process to opt out.
It is a process to opt out. Exactly. Yeah, you're saying it's not just a box.
It's not just a box. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
think people. It was too bad that I think in the 2020 election, they went on the Dominion machines and all of that. They lost that election in March and April when about 20 of the most important states changed their voting laws. Mark Elias and all that Democratic funded legal advocacy went in and they said under the guise of COVID, mail-in and early balloting. And if you look at the actual numbers, we went radically from 70% of people voting on election day, I think in 2014, 12, to only 30% nationwide.
Mhm.
So in that radical change in just 4 years, from 2016 to 2020, the Republicans had no clue of what was going on. So they kept saying, we got robbed of the election. And they did, but it wasn't the way they said they did. They got robbed when they radically changed these state voting laws and then got everybody, and I mean everybody, to vote early or vote more importantly by mail. And
Yes.
and the Republicans never caught on until 2024. And then they started to catch on. But
But
Molly Ball in Time Magazine wrote about it. And she said she's left wing. And she had a Time essay, and she called it a cabal and a conspiracy, how we got left wing money, Wall Street, the unions, the protesters, we modulated the demonstration, and we changed the voting laws. And that's how they won. And we've never really talked about mail. And we should I think Trump's main effort should be to bar early voting and mail-in voting, because
I
you can
couldn't.
see it
I
destroys campaign.
Oh yeah, well look at Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, and I
Mhm.
got to tell you that you might find this surprising, but the only strategy that the Republican Party of Pennsylvania is funding is mail-in ballots. They're trying to convert everyone to mail-in ballots, and then they're saying vote early. Now we don't have real early voting, so they're saying go stand in line at a voter office, at a voting services office, and get a mail-in ballot, fill it out while you're there, and drop it in a box. And they're calling that early voting. It is they're using social media figures, and every dollar that is invested, if you look at the funding of campaigns for good candidates, they get nothing. Millions of dollars pumped into the push to move Republicans to mail-in ballots, as if they've never heard of Colorado, Washington, California, and Oregon. It is baffling to us. So we always say, vote on November 4 in person at your local precinct, because it's the easiest and most secure way. It is a matter of great contention here, but that is the singular strategy of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, pushing people to vote by mail.
Yeah, and I think it's regrettable, but your key word was secure. The Democrats don't want it secure. They want anybody to vote through mail-in balloting. It's pretty easy to do when you don't have to show up with an ID.
Right.
And so I think the Republicans' attitude, as I understand it from Trump when he said during the campaign, I hate mail-in balloting, but we're going to play fire with fire.
Mhm.
So their attitude now is, until we change the laws, we're going to do what they do, and we're going to outdo them. And that's how they won, they feel, in 2024. But it ruins a campaign, because you can see that all the things that came out about Jay Jones
Mm-hmm.
didn't mean as much as they would, because thousands of people had voted early already in Virginia. And that's what happens as the campaign goes on, it changes and modulates, but the votes are calcified, they're frozen.
Mhm.
Yep.
And you miss out on late development. And
And the interesting
anyway, the left is, I think the attitude that the Republicans have to have is, the left has sort of vacated the battle of ideas. They admit now that they have no ideas that people want. So they're either going to do one of two things. They try to change the demography, and they did a pretty good job on Biden, bring in millions of people that they feel will be subject to entitlements, federal, state, local assistance, and reward that loyalty at the polls. Or they want to change the system, and that means get rid of in-person voting, get rid of a 9-person Supreme Court, pack the court, get rid of the Electoral College, bring in Puerto Rico, bring in DC, because they just don't feel in a constitutional republic with a static population that they're ever going to convince anybody for this crazy socialist DEI agenda. And the Republicans have to then just concentrate on, don't let them change the system, and secure the border, and stop illegal immigration, and make immigration meritocratic, diverse, and measurable. I mean, measured, not, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million a year.
Right. And so, that 30% that we talked about, and this group that they do have, includes what is now on the Urban Dictionary a defined term. It's the affluent white female liberal, or awful.
Yeah.
And we have
I haven't heard the awful part. That's pretty good.
yeah, it's pretty good. And we have a clip of one that we want to play. Can we play clip one?
I found out today that somebody that I work with is a conservative, and he's somebody who's really intelligent, and he's somebody who works in climate tech as a super smart guy, somebody I would never have thought was conservative, and apparently he is. And it's surprising, and it's disgusting. But what's most surprising to me is the level of sudden hatred that I have for him. Sudden hatred for this man who I used to respect suddenly just went boop, and I hate him now.
Okay.
Crazy.
She's shocked at her own programming.
She's triggered.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I go to an airport with my wife and we get confronted by some people, I always say, she says, she always says, here she comes. And she is always white, affluent, well-dressed, gray hair. And it's never somebody who's black or Hispanic or male. It's always, and on my podcast, I have to apologize. I've used Karen so much. I have all these readers. I mean, people that write in and say, we're not going to listen to you because my wife's named Karen. And you keep blasting Karen. But there is that. I was just in Menlo Park and somebody came up to me in Starbucks. The same thing. You don't know what you're doing, the damage you do. You should be ashamed of yourself. We're in a fascist state. You know better. And just without any invitation. And you just say, excuse me, did I get in your face? Well, there you would go, wouldn't you? You would just want to hit me probably. That's what you people do. That's the younger version, and that version is what Mondami is counting on, and
Right.
what Kamala Harris is counting on, and that is pretty much the movers and shakers in California are those people.
Mm.
And a lot of it's based on affluence, that they're never subject to the consequences of their ideology. So they're all for teachers unions, or kids are all in prep school. They're all for 40 cents a kilowatt power, wind and solar, but they live on the coast where it's 70 degrees year round.
Right,
Or
right.
they're all for defund the police, but when you go into Piedmont or Malibu, there's all private security. And so they're in these shells, they're very affluent, so it's kind of a boutique expense if they can afford to be liberal and feel good about themselves and not guilty about how affluent and privileged they are and how white they are. So
Yes.
it's a psychological condition. I think they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm white and I'm privileged and I'm wealthy, but I really like all this, and I like going to Florence. I like my home in Tiburon. I feel so bad about it. I guess I better vote for all these entitlements and all this left-wing agenda, but just keep them away from it.
And they become so deeply indoctrinated. They truly are awful. I mean, it really is a fitting term.
No, I think Winsome Sears in Virginia is starting to encounter them, and she's discovering that these people are actually racist, that they made horrible cartoons about her, and they confronted her. And I think she's discovering that maybe, just maybe for a lot of people, this Karen ideology is a psychological mechanism to square the circle, that they're not uncomfortable with people that don't look like them or from different classes. And so they fabricate this political identity that, it's kind of like the medieval church. When you were a sinner or you were a fornicator or you're usurer, you gave penance and then you still got to heaven. And their way of thinking is being a Karen and being left wing and do-gooder is a way to get to heaven, and without giving up your sinful race or affluence. I think that's a lot of it.
I think you're right, and it's so deeply embedded in these people. Eric, if we could do clip 2. It's so deeply embedded in these people that it's tearing families apart. And so we have a clip that, if we could play clip 2, it's shocking the way this woman looks at her family.
Hi. This is my first TikTok, so I'm kind of nervous to post this, but I'm just wondering if there's anyone else out there like me, who is married to a MAGA. I have been thinking about leaving since the election, and we ended up going to counseling, which honestly really doesn't help because I'm not going to change my views and he's not going to change his views. I don't really see any other way out of this except for divorce.
And that's it. He's MAGA.
I'm not.
He wants the border
Yeah,
protected.
you get the you get the impression that he's not the one that sought counseling, and he was live and let live. Oh, you're a left wing loon. Well, you're still my wife. That's not a problem, but not with the left.
No,
Right.
I have a twin brother, and he has not spoken to me in 5 years, and an older brother that he's spoken to me once in 10 years. They're very hard left, but it all comes from them. For them, they just can't leave it alone, and they're wide. So if you see them in town, because one of them lives there, they don't want to talk. But what I'm getting at, I know it sounds partisan, but I don't think that the conservative mindset is anywhere near this vindictive left-wing obsession. It's more live and let live, libertarian, go do your thing. Politics is not everything. My community, my family, my religion, my job, that's what I'm interested in. Politics is important, but I don't live and die, and I don't make decisions entirely on ideology. But these people are just obsessed, and it's torn up. I know so many families, but and when everybody said, I wish we could just all get along, but in every single one, and maybe I'm talking about 20 of them, it's always the person on the left that announces that he or she can no longer be in your presence. It's never the conservative person.
No.
Mm-mm. I've had more white women call me a white supremacist than I can actually count. But, Victor, you can't see I'm not white. I'm also not a supremacist, so yeah, I understand.
It's astonishing. So when you look at all of this and you say, okay, we've got this, we're in this quandary. There's some real victories that have been had. I mean, I think, in my opinion, what happened in Gaza with the deal getting done was a real victory. Having the EPA and other agencies looking at repealing these regulations we spoke about, you mentioned earlier, that could result in maybe $4 trillion of burden lifted off the shoulders of this economy, really freeing it up. That's the magic wand that solves a lot of problems. That's what, as you said earlier, they're afraid of. The agenda is so good, and there are a lot of victories coming out of it, but we always feel almost like we're losing because this social media presence and what they're doing on corporate media is so oppressive.
It is, and there's, as you say, there's fundamental changes. I have where I work. There's a lot of generals and admirals, and they would always tell me, "We're never going to get recruitment. Everybody is too heavy, or they're in gangs, or they're tattooed." And I said, "No, it's DEI. You send the wrong message." But whether you like it or not, white males died at 75% of all fatalities in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they only made up 34% of the population. So you're targeting a demographic that died twice in their numbers in god awful places, and you're saying that they're racist. Or Mark Millian is running an investigation of them, or Lloyd Austin. No. Listen, but now we were 50,000 recruits down, and it wasn't like it took 4 years. The military has met all of their recruitment. That's a fantastic achievement. No one's talking about it. They're talking about Pete Hexet's tattoo, but whatever he did, it was magical because they were resigned to a smaller military, and they said it's demographic. You can't compete with the private sector, and he just blew them all away.
Yeah,
and said, "Come back. We're going to treat you just as a person. We're not going to care about your gender or race. Your promotion is going to be meritocratic." So there's been all of these. I think Anwar. They opened it up, and then it's millions of acres, and they're only going to be drilling on 2,000 acres. Because of horizontal, and that's a big win. That's going to give a lot of energy.
Oh yeah,
but they don't. That is so much more important than Christy Gnome's hair extensions, you know. And they don't get that message out.
We are bumping up against the time here. Thank you so much for joining us a second time. We really appreciate these conversations, and hopefully you will come back once again to join us on the Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Victor Davis Hanson.
Thank you all for having me.